in. How's everybody doing today?
Good.
Good.
Just set a buyer consultation for 2:30 today, 5 minutes ago.
Nice. Very nice. Way to go, Larry Hilliard. I'm telling you, Zinnia, I've seen your post. You've got business coming out your ears. That's great.
Yes, I do. I'm lucky.
No, you're blessed and talented. That's what
Blessed.
it is.
Thank
All
you.
right. So we're going to get started here. It's 11 o'clock. We had an appointment at 11 o'clock. You're getting me instead of David Jones. So sad, so sorry to disappoint you guys, but David's going to jump in. He had an overlapping commitment, so I'm going to get us started in a little interview process. Did I not see Sean Polston on here? Yes. Okay. Sean Polston. There he is. The man, the myth, the legend. So today's shift tactic number 11 is master the market of the moment, short sales, foreclosures, REOs, BPOs, all those acronyms. And there's no one that I know personally that knows more about this stuff than Sean. So we're going to spend a lot of time with Sean. Sean, thanks for giving your time. I really appreciate it. When David asked me to jump in and lead this in the beginning, I said, what about Sean? And he's like, I already talked to him. I was like, okay, perfect. There we go. So speaking of that, Sean Polston, again, he is an industry leader, not just like Southern Arizona, an industry leader in his knowledge of all these concepts. So Sean, I'm going to just pose some questions to you, if that's okay.
Sure. I'm going to turn the light on in here because I look pretty dark.
You look like you're in the witness protection program,
Yeah.
which is not a bad thing. It's just all that nice sunlight coming off of your back porch. So you could just take That's better. That's fine.
Might have helped. Yeah.
So tell me, Sean, what do you think about the market of where we're at right now? Do you foresee an increasing amount of short sales, REOs, foreclosures?
Well, a lot of it's going to have to do with how we come out of this, right? How many businesses are able to reopen? What happens with all of these homeowners that have gone into forbearance plans or deferment plans that aren't making their mortgage payments right now?
Right.
What they do to come out of those situations, and what's interesting is the rules and how those things are going to be handled are almost, I'm seeing articles where all of that stuff's changing on almost a daily basis. I'd encourage you guys, if your clients are asking you about these deferment programs or forbearance programs, is if their lender is, if their loan's owned by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac or is insured by FHA or VA, you're dealing with the federal government who can just change the rules and change the game anytime they want, and they do. So I think a lot of it is going to depend on how all of that shakes out. Also, a lot of it's going to depend on the folks who are going into those programs, if they truly have had a job loss related to this, if they end up, and depending on where their equity is in their home, if they end up having to relocate elsewhere other than Tucson to find employment, that's also going to have a big impact. And with the rate of default has doubled already.
Wow.
So yeah, and that sounds bad, but at the same time, the default percentage of mortgages was at kind of one of the lowest points in history. So
Right.
That it's doubled is still overall not like we saw back in 2008, 2009.
Right.
But we're also pretty early on in this.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to be seen. The idea that we're going to come out the other side of this and not see an increase in those things is very wishful thinking. We are poised. We're going to see an increase in REO stuff all at once just because of the shutdown. So what the government did is they basically put all of the foreclosures that were supposed to happen on hold.
Right. They're just waiting right in queue.
Yeah, and there's this segment of the market never goes away. It just ebbs and flows with what's going on. I mean, there's been a foreclosure every business day in Tucson since 1993. I mean, so it's just at some points it's a bigger percentage or a smaller percentage of the market, but all of the homes that would have been getting foreclosed, you know, this month, next month, and the month after, all of those foreclosures have been put on hold. And those were going to happen for other reasons, guys. None of that had anything to do with COVID.
Right.
Because of the way, you know, if you look at the trustee sale process in Arizona, they record the notice of trustee sale, which is schedules the foreclosure to happen 90 days later. So that they put the brakes on for 90 days, well, all of the foreclosures that were going to happen during that 90-day period were already in the works. It had nothing to do with COVID. So that they built a dam stopping all of that stuff for 90 days. Come 90 days, all of that stuff that was supposed to happen is going to happen. So we are going to see an uptick in them, even if it's just all the normal stuff that got put on hold.
Right. So and that's probably going to be spun in the media as a huge negative. Look at all the incredible amount of foreclosures. In reality, it's just like you said, it's a buildup of what's been happening for 90 days instead of a slow trickle. It's going to be just a dam burst of foreclosures that will probably happen.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the thing that's also still happening in most cases is the other people could be entering the foreclosure process now because they haven't been making their payments for 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. I mean, I've seen properties where the people didn't make payment for years, but all of those properties are still entering the foreclosure process. So the lenders are still recording notice of trustee sales, but those foreclosures can't happen for at least 90 days, which unless that gets extended, that's the normal time frame to foreclose on a property in Arizona anyway.
Right.
Oh.
Okay. So what would you advise if we have our agents have buyers that are kind of sitting on the sideline and they're thinking this way, well, I'm going to wait and see if I can't snatch up a short sale or some type of foreclosure deal?
Well, in most cases, there's a little bit of a thought process in buyers' minds that those properties get given away. And they don't. I mean, and you know, a lot of times while they do get sold, most of the time they get sold as is, where is. But there's some of these lenders like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac that if they can fix them up to get a bigger dollar for the property, they do. I have some clients that'll do major rehabs to them to fix them up and sell them and get more money. But you know, it's typically when, you know, if you've got a FHA, VA financed buyer where the home's condition needs to meet a certain criteria for them to even be able to buy it, the odds that they're going to want to wait for this inventory so they can get some kind of a deal, it's probably not going to be a deal for them.
Right. Yeah. It almost seems like that's going to be some type of an investor that's going to be looking for those type of opportunities, not your typical buyer that's actually wanting to buy a home to live in. Would that be accurate?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the house, the foreclosure properties that have had severe neglect and things like that, and you get an as-is seller, well, in most cases, those FHA, VA buyers they're not a buyer for that property. So.
Okay. So would you have any advice for us as we're dealing with sellers, especially sellers that may be taking advantage of the forbearance? What kind of advice would you give us to give to them?
Well, if they can make their mortgage payment, they should.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's never smart to stop making a mortgage payment. And, you know, I hope I'm not offending anybody on this call. I mean, there can be situations you can find yourself in where you don't have a choice in that matter. But if it's something they're making a choice to do, they're getting themselves into a deal with, I mean, the person who holds the cards and how that's going to look down the road, whether they're going to need to catch it up all at once, whether they're going to need to make larger payments, whether they're going to be able to do a loan modification to solve that going forward. All of that is just completely unknown. And the servicers aren't even going to start looking at that until they're about 30 days out from the expiration of the forbearance or deferment as far as how that's even going to be structured. So there's a lot of unknown there as far as these folks who are going into these programs.
Right.
I'm
sorry to interrupt. There's so many people that are like treating it like free money. Why would I make the payment if I don't have to make the payment? And it's like, ooh, this is not a good situation.
Well, and one report I saw either yesterday or the day before is that there's 6 million loans that have entered the forbearance program already, or different forbearance programs already nationwide. That's not just Arizona. But.
Right. Wow. Does that number shock you, or is what you would expect? To me, that seems like a big number.
It seemed like a big number to me too.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people who are looking at this as that it's like a gift or some kind of free money, and it's not going to end up being.
Yeah, I hear you say that it is a financial gamble. You're playing financial Russian roulette because you don't know what's going to happen at the end. They could say, all right, here's your lump sum payment. You owe us $7,000, $12,000, whatever that number is. And if you can't pay it, then you're moving into the foreclosure realm.
Right. Well, and there's right now their guidance is like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are not going to require that they're going to offer other kinds of workouts as far as a larger payment or possibly putting the payments on the back end of the loan or maybe modifying the loan. But if you can afford to make those payments, I mean, why not make them and get to 30 days out to fix? Because you're not going to know until you get there what that looks like, and it's not going to be up to you.
Right.
The only decision you're going to have in that is, hell no, I ain't doing it, and then you're entering the default space.
Right. And historically, I think that I don't know if I would trust that to some of our lending institutions. They haven't necessarily proven themselves to be the most level-headed in that area, right? I mean, they're there to make money.
Right. Right. Well, and I work on both sides of that fence. I mean, we do REO stuff, which REO and foreclosure is really kind of saying the same thing. And we do short sale stuff. And I can tell you that, the lenders have done a really good job conditioning us that we have a real obligation to pay them. But that obligation they don't feel that same sense of obligation to us. When we're a loan number, and either we're a non-performing loan or we're a performing loan. So these folks are not really our friends; they're our debtor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's important to keep in mind, right? Can you back me up to you said REO and foreclosure are virtually the same things? Can you kind of give us a real quick analysis of REO, foreclosure, short sale for people that may not know?
Well, the REO and foreclosure, I mean, the terms get used interchangeably by the general public. And what REO stands for is real estate owned, which is a department within a financial institution of the real estate they own. Foreclosure, and a buyer will say, oh, I want to buy a foreclosure. Well, actually what foreclosure is the process that the loan goes through to become an REO through the trustee sale. And the trustee sale, one of the things you guys should really make sure you know forwards and backwards if you want to have these conversations is how the trustee sale process works, which they touch on that at real estate school, but in upswing markets, which we've been in for the last decade, it's one of those things that you may not need to pull out of the memory banks very often. But the first step to foreclosure is you get a mortgage. It's
Yeah.
kind of a joke, right?
Yeah.
So the first step is you get a mortgage. And then at some point you stop paying it. Although the lender has the ability to foreclose for other reasons, like due on sale clauses and things like that, it's pretty rare that they foreclose on a mortgage for any other reason than they stop getting paid. So then they stop getting paid, and at some point from when they stop getting paid, about the quickest I've ever seen it happen is 60 days late. And I have had people come to me to short sell properties that they walked away from 4 years earlier, and the bank never foreclosed on it. And they come to me to short sell, and the bank will do a short sell, but they've never foreclosed on the property. But at some point that they're delinquent, the lender records the notice of trustee sale. And then from there, by statute, the actual foreclosure or the auction down at the courthouse steps is at least 90 days away. And what typically pushes it beyond the 91st day is if it falls on a weekend or a holiday, then it'll push it. At any point in that process, the lender, the beneficiary of the deed of trust, can extend that. They can push that out. Sometimes it's because there's sometimes they'll declare bankruptcy. Sometimes the lender will postpone these things for their own reason. Sometimes people are trying to work on a short sale, and the lender will postpone the foreclosure to give the short sale more time to work. From all of them go through that auction process, and what happens at the auction is the lender enters a credit bid, or sometimes it's just referred to as the bid. But the lender enters a credit bid to protect their interest because they don't want this to sell for $1.
Right.
So then the lender enters a credit bid. Well, either no investors show up to the auction, which that actually happens down in Sierra Vista or Bisbee, where they do the auctions. Up here, that's extremely rare. But if nobody shows up to the auction to bid on it, or the investor does not perceive that credit bid to be enough of a deal for the property, then nobody bids on it, and then it reverts to the lender, and that's how it becomes an REO.
Yeah. Okay, gotcha.
So short sale is when somebody figures out they've got this problem, that they don't have the equity in the property to sell it outright. They're not going to be able to keep it for one reason or another. The most common are death, divorce, job loss, job relocation. Sometimes it's just a business decision that they're looking at their financial life, and cutting this loose solves a lot of other problems.
Yeah.
Whatever the case may be, they've decided they want to do something about it and not get foreclosed on.
Right.
So short sale is a mechanism for us to sell the property, settle the debt with the lender, versus it going down the foreclosure path. If that all makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. So do you, I guess, are you planning on shifting your business to focus more on these types of opportunities? Or do you foresee just a continuation of the vibrant market that we have right now with maybe a slight uptick here?
That's kind of that it all remains to be seen thing. With a lot of it's going to depend on what happens with employment and coming out of this thing. How many of, there's a lot of thinking that this is going to be like a light switch getting flipped when we come out of this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of people who tell you it ain't going to be like a light switch getting flipped coming out of this thing. And I'm even hearing some of these. I read an article today on the default. I follow a lot of the news on the default side of mortgage, and there's one of them I was reading today where that economist was predicting this could be worse than the last time. So, and economists and weather people are the only people who can be wrong most of the time and keep their jobs.
Yeah.
So it's a little tough to know. The idea that there is not going to be some kind of uptick over the next, 6 to 12 months in this, I'd be surprised if there's not an uptick in it. It's the thing we don't know is how severe the uptick is going to be.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if we knew
As
that,
far as,
we'd be buying lottery tickets, right?
right, well, as far as what we're doing, I never, I've done a huge short sale business, done REO stuff, done traditional stuff my entire career. I've
Mhm.
never decided this was for me one day, wasn't for me the next. Although trust me, I've thought about it because they all have their own unique pain in the neck to them.
Mhm.
Whether that's, dealing with traditional sellers who've got emotions that are running high to short sales, the biggest challenge you have is keeping the short sale seller engaged in the process because it's lengthy, to REO sellers who are incredibly analytical and very demanding as far as, you getting their tasks done on time when they want them and having to pay their bills for them and get reimbursed. And so all of these things have their own little unique, not so fun piece to them. But I've never just done one. I
Right.
do all three of those things.
Right. Right. Okay. So before we parlay, I want you guys to start thinking about questions you want to ask Sean, because this is an incredible opportunity to peek into the mind of someone that walks through this. But Sean, while they're thinking about questions, will you give them, if you were an agent and you've really never experienced doing short sales, I mean, you've been a realtor for 5 years, so the market that you've been in has just been that woo. What kind of advice will you give our agents regarding this potential upcoming shift in the market?
Well, a short sale, the thing you got to remember with the short sale is the lender, what the lender's outcome in a short sale is they want to lose less money than they would by foreclosing on the property. From the listing side of the business, when we list a short sale, we do what we can to look to what is this property actually worth, and pricing it there, and then working reverse from there, because the lender is going to have their own valuations done on the property, and they're going to come back with a figure. And if a property is worth $200,000 and you started that listing at $170,000, you're going to have a really hard time having an argument with them about value.
Mm-hmm.
Where me, I start that property at 200 and they come back and I end up getting an offer at 185 or whatever on it, and they tell me I want 200. I have the ability to go back to them and go, tried that, didn't work. It was on the market 45 days at that price. We got this many showings. That didn't work. We've already tried that. So we have a much better argument to make with them as far as value goes.
Awesome.
Short sale sellers, the short sale process with the lender is a very, very detailed and analytical process of being able to document and demonstrate what's going on with the homeowner. It's very similar to when they got the loan in the first place, that it's 2 years tax returns, 2 to 3 months bank statements, all of this financial information that they had to get the loan. Now they're having to provide to get out a loan. And if you don't, and if your client isn't willing to provide that stuff and isn't willing to do that, you have no deal. In some cases, depending on what's going on with them, you could contact that lender and ask them if they have a streamlined option for this borrower. But if they don't have some kind of streamlined processing option for that, you are dead in the water. So if you're going to list that home and give this person the hopes that that thing's going to work at all, it's not. And you're going to end up listing that home, potentially getting a buyer wound up. Buyer comes along, makes an offer, gets wound up in a deal that there isn't a chance in hell that thing is closing, because you have a seller who hasn't been properly educated on the amount of participation they need to have in this. And if they don't want to do anything, that's fine. That just means they're going the foreclosure route.
Right.
That doesn't mean that, because short sale is about going to your lender hat in hand and saying, let's work something out.
Yeah.
It isn't the other way. So the seller's going to need to continuously provide that documentation. You know, the tax returns, depending on the time of year, we might need updated tax returns, but we're going to need updated pay stubs, updated bank statements the whole way through this. Because if they happen to win the lottery and deposit that into their checking account, the lender's going to say, tell them to go ahead and pay us. You know, they're not going to do a short sale. So, and so there's a lot of that, of making sure that you've got a seller who wants to do this. The other piece of the puzzle is you're going to need to be in ongoing communication with the short sale lender. And in a lot of cases, what that looks like is they call you when they feel like it. And if you're not able to, or not necessarily when they feel like it, it's when your number comes up.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times a person at a bank that's working on their loss mitigation department, they're working on hundreds of these at the same time. They're not just working on one. And so when your file magically appears on their screen and they're looking to work on the file and they've got a question for you, they call you. And like in my case, I have full-time staff that answers the phone just for this purpose, but they call you and you're out on a showing or something like that. You try and call these people back, they don't answer the phone 99% of the time.
You're waiting
So
for them
then it
to
becomes
come back around. Yeah.
And you wait for them to call the next time. And then this is how that phone call goes. Just so you know, when they call, it's, you know, hey, Larry, I'm calling, this is, you know, so-and-so with Bank of America. I'm calling you about this file. I need you to verify the loan number and the last 4 digits of the social security number of the buyer or the seller. You're out at a showing and you even pick that call up. That is the idea that you have that right in front of you are pretty slim, right?
Yeah.
So then they go, okay, we'll call you back, and they hang up. So there's a certain amount of staying on top of these transactions that isn't for everybody.
Right.
My personality style, it's right in our wheelhouse. We enjoy doing it, but it's not something for everybody.
Yeah, got it. That's great information. All right, let's open it up. Do you guys have some questions for Sean? If you do, there you go, Zinnia.
I think what I was thinking about is as far as lead generation for short sales and these types of transactions, do you have, because I know that I've heard agents who have somehow made some connection with financial institution, lenders, banks, and stuff like that, that give them leads. Is there anything that you would suggest for us to do? I haven't worked on a lot of them. I have been in the business only 4 years, so I haven't had much opportunity on the sellers, on the listing side of it.
So short sale, I'm sorry, that was our phone in Sierra Vista ringing through my email. I'm sorry, I had to clip it. The only way an agent is ever going to receive a short sale referral from a financial institution is if that borrower has already had dialogue with that financial institution, and the financial institution gets, basically they're like, okay, this is the path we want to go, and the financial institution goes, okay, here we want, you know, here, give Sean a call. Or they'll tell me to give them a call, which I have a couple different financial institutions that do that. But the financial institution doesn't actually have the ability to, without that borrower's permission, to be really disclosing much of anything due to the Fair Credit Reporting Act and all that stuff. So if you get solicited by some scheme that says, oh, well, we get our information, we have, you know, early late payment reporting or this and that stuff's usually a scam. It's a question of what they're going to do is they're going to be sending postcards and stuff like that to the notice of default list, which to get the notice of default information, I saw there was a comment in there that the way that gets done in Cochise County is somehow different than Maricopa County. It's actually the I don't know if you guys know about thecountyrecorder.com, but seeing the notice of trustee sale information for Cochise County, it's all right there.
Okay.
You can even search
Sounds good.
by notice of trustee sale if you wanted to market to those people. Now, here's my experience with marketing to that list. You can market to that list by, trying to find a phone number for them, reach out, cold calling them, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
What I have found is there is a pretty low conversion rate of those folks. A lot of times they've already been going through the process, and by the time they get there, by the time they get to the notice of trustee sale being recorded, they haven't done anything really to solve their problem yet in a lot of cases. So the odds that they're going to start doing something are actually pretty low. I'm not saying I haven't seen conversion from there, but I did that. I did those different things with postcards and mailings and trying to call them. Back when we'd have, I think there was 1 month we had 9,000 notices of trustee sale recorded in a single month in Pima County.
Wow.
And the conversion rate was really, really low. And I'm not telling you not to do it. It's just the conversion rates on that kind of stuff are not what you a lot of times think they are. So.
Interesting. Thanks, Cindy. Anybody else have a question for Sean? You guys excited about going out there and trying to market and get buyers to REOs and all that fun stuff?
I think it'll be interesting.
Buyer, go for it, Larry. What do you got?
I was just going to say, I think it's going to be interesting to see if, what opportunities come. But we've got another couple of weeks or maybe a month of this process we're in for what's going, what's going to emerge, what's going to be the path that the majority of the people who get into the forbearance programs or where all this stuff's kind of, we're still a little ahead of the curve on knowing, what's going to come out of this and whether to go, okay, it looks like we're going to be doing a majority of short sales. It's something we need to learn more about, or is it, all the different processes. I think we're still a little bit ahead of it, but it's good to know and be informed of what might be new opportunities in the not too distant future.
To me, this is like a pipe wrench, right? So you don't use a pipe wrench very often, but when you need a pipe wrench, man, you really need a pipe wrench, right? Or any kind of certain tool. This is a tool that we need to be getting out of our toolbox and playing with it, making sure we understand how it works, the processes, because just like you said, Larry, we don't know, but if it does, that forbearance continues to rise and it leads to a bunch of, short sale opportunities / REOs, then we can be taking advantage of that opportunity. But we need to get our skill set ready to go right now. Would you agree, Sean?
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't take much of a change in the market to trigger a lot of this.
Mm-hmm.
If we were to see even a 10% change in the market, we've got just oodles and oodles of people who've been refinancing their homes every chance they get, and refinancing them in the case of FHA, refinancing them to 96.5%. In the case of VA, refinancing the home to 100%. In the case of conventional loans, they'll let them refinance it to 97%. Now, all of those groups of people are underwater from day one. Okay? They are underwater, just even a 6% real estate commission, even a 5% real estate commission, they are underwater that, let alone paying any buyer's closing costs and paying any title escrow fees and property tax expirations, all that great stuff that goes into selling a home. So it would not take much of a change in the market to completely tip the scales for those folks they're already underwater right now. That makes sense. Even a 10% change in the real estate values would really tip the scale for a lot of those folks that just honestly don't have a ton of skin in the game as far as the mortgage on the property goes.
Right. And those people are probably more vulnerable because they're more likely to walk. Like I don't have equity in the property anyway. All these other items, you know, build up. I'm just leaving, you know.
Well, there's some of that. Okay,
Mhm.
but what is much more common, and that's one of the misnomers that happened last time around. While we did have a number of investors who were buying properties with kind of these exotic loans that haven't made their way back, you know, stated income, stated asset, foreign national. I mean, we saw it all back in 2006 and 2007. We haven't seen that stuff, that those quote unquote investors that got themselves into those things, hoping that the properties were still just going to run away appreciation wise, that walked away from them. But during that time, there actually became like this thought process that the people who, you know, that the person that foreclosed home, or those people who were doing a short sale, were just walking away from it. And I can tell you guys that if this is the side of the business that you want to explore, you need to be ready to hear some incredibly messed up stuff that happens to people. From the husband was working, husband and wife both working, plugging right along, he develops Parkinson's disease, to cancer, to divorce, to job loss, to job relocations, to spouse dies in a car accident. They qualified to get the loan with both of their incomes. He or she dies, and there's no life insurance, and now they're short in income. And what they're going to get from Social Security isn't going to make it up. So in most of the cases with this stuff, there's something going on there. So even if you guys are a buyer or have the buyer going to a short sale property, don't necessarily condition that buyer that, oh, these people are just walking away from this home, because there's a strong chance there's something that caused them to do that. Because if they had their employment, they were making their money, they could stick it out and make the payments like clockwork, they would.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's life shows up combined with the equity not being there that causes this. It's not a question. And some people, and Jay, you're absolutely spot on. There are people who just go, screw it. Don't care about their credit enough to care and will walk away from it. But there's a lot of them where life shows up.
Yeah. Yeah.
I did 5 listing appointments in the office one time, all short sales. So I'd have them come. This is one of the things I do with the short sale people, to condition them that how this process is going to go, and that I was going to be in control of the process, and they were going to get on board with the program if they wanted my help. Well, they'd come meet with me. So they come into the office. Well, 4 of the 5 I met with that day. I listed all 5 of them that day. That's how many of these were going on. 4 of the 5 of them, I had to go out to Bonnie, who used to be at the front desk at JV, and get Kleenex from her. Wow. Because the wives started crying during the listing appointment. And the last one, when I went out to get Kleenex, I hear Bonnie gossiping with somebody. I think it was the MCA at the time, and she goes, I don't know what Sean's doing to those people in there.
Yeah.
So, well, I wasn't doing a damn thing to them. It was life and reality was setting in. And when when you never experience a declining market, and, Bob sold his house up the street for $180,000. And then I'm talking to Mark, who lives on the same street, 4 months later, and now it's a question of needs to sell the house for 165 to have a chance in hell of getting out of there. Those are not pleasant conversations to have.
Yeah. Yeah. Does anyone else have any other questions for Sean?
Hey, I just wanted to piggyback on what Sean's saying, because this was my business from 2008 to 13. Mm-hmm. And when you get into this, you need to realize that you need systems in place, because I had 11 people on my team, and it was like the gerbil wheel. And you jump on it, and it just keeps going and going. And I did not do the short sales. I referred them to Sean. And actually, I'm referring REOs to Sean now. But if you're going to get involved in this, you need to find the systems and realize that it is very detailed, and you're going to have somebody telling you what to do, and you're gonna have to get photos and all that stuff. And it was a very interesting time.
Yeah. Well, I think we're all hoping and praying that these times don't exactly come back to that. But I do think I firmly believe that we better be sharpening that tool. We need to know about what's going on, or at least be able to, just like you said, Dave, you need to know your path of, okay, if I encounter this, where can I refer them? Is it worth me learning this entire process, or should I just refer it out and be able to concentrate on my business? Excellent.
Well, and that REO business, as far as, looking at the agents that list the REO properties and thinking, boy, that must be easy. There's months and months and months of work that goes into that before the thing ever gets listed. If they're still occupied, you got to talk them out of the house or participate in their eviction from the property, which ain't a whole lot of fun. Then from there, there's all kinds of detailed reporting and charts and all kinds of stuff you get to do for them. And if you don't hit those tasks in a timely manner, they'll pull the listing from you and give it to somebody else. And then you also, and for a lot of these lenders, you get to pay all their bills for them.
Yeah.
So you're paying for utilities. They decide to do $3,000 worth of repairs to the property. You get to front the money for that and get reimbursed. And if you don't dot the I's, cross the T's just right on the invoices, you don't have clear copies of the invoices, any clear copy of the check you wrote, any number of reasons, they'll kick that stuff back. And after a certain amount of time, they just won't pay you. So if you get into the REO business, you are opening up your own little loss mitigation department of making sure you don't end up losing. I've had properties actually in Cochise County where we had $14,000 on a property one time of repair expense, and the thing only ended up selling for $80,000. I mean, we had more out than the dang commission that we were getting back by a long, long ways. So if we screwed that up, that's a really quick way to lose a bunch of money. And Mr. Kipling has stories about that kind of stuff he can share too. So.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't want to hear them.
Yeah. So.
That's a Barbara Walters special. We don't need to get into that because we'll all be crying about it. So.
Yeah. Well, Sean and I, we worked together a lot during that time, and actually we would have the stories. Now, we didn't have any Kleenex between us as we were going through all this, but yeah, it's a very interesting thing, entirely a different type of business, but and you got to watch your expenses too if you want to make the money at this, because like you said, we had my wife was involved, Francie was involved in reimbursements, and that's a whole nother department of this whole thing. So if you want to get into it, I'm not saying don't, but if you want to get into it, you really need to know what you're doing. Yeah,
I hear you, Dave. Systems got to have. You're at risk if you don't have a really good, clean system on how to handle this.
And one of the things you could do if you wanted to test that water on getting into REO, sign up with some of these places to do BPOs.
Okay.
And go through that process and go through the process of doing BPOs. And if you don't like how analytical that work is, and you don't like getting questioned and corrections kicked back to you and them wanting you to clarify why you did something the way you did it, if doing broker price opinions is a really easy way to figure out if you want into that business. Because if you start doing BPOs and you go, hell, I don't want to do this, you do not want to be in the REO business. It is a real easy way for you to figure out in a hurry that you do not want to be in that business. And actually, that's in a lot of cases, you end up having to do BPOs for these companies for months or years before they'll ever give you an REO to work on, because they want to make sure you know what you're doing.
So somebody just said, what is a BPO? They wrote it in the chat, Sean. It says broker price opinion. Explain it's an easy answer. We explain what a BPO is, basically.
If you guys have ever seen an appraisal, as far as the way there's adjustments and all of the different information that gets entered into the appraisal report, it is not quite the same thing, but it is extremely similar. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's what it says, broker's price of opinion. It's kind of a CMA. You'll fill it out on some official documents on their you got to enter into their system, right?
The vast majority of them have some sort of platform you use to enter it, and the complexity can vary between some of them. I have some banks I work for that there's just an extremely generic form, but those are more of your community-based banks. They're not the great big ones that are doing stuff through asset management companies.
Yeah. Hey, did y'all already talk about what you're seeing going on right now? What you're seeing in the BPO, the short sale, the REO world? Have y'all talked about that at all?
Well, a little bit, yeah. REO's on hold, right?
Yeah.
Because foreclosure's on hold. Short sales, of course, that isn't affected by that. Other than, I think a lot of people who may have needed to make a decision about doing a short sale or not, they're kind of maybe waiting to see what happens with these different government things that are going on, to see what they're going to end up needing to do, if there is going to be any way of saving them.
Right.
We'll see. Time's going to tell, but the default rate and the amount of people that are going into these not paying their mortgage programs is just off the chart.
Yeah.
And as far as interestingly enough, all of the BPO stuff we do for fees, 4 months ago, that stuff jumped. So it wasn't even just
jumped in quantity, or
jumped in quantity to about double to sometimes triple what we had been seeing, of what had seemed normal for probably the last 9 years.
Right.
It just really jumped. So,
which could be, some people say is a leading indicator for possible foreclosures and short sales, right?
Right. Absolutely. Well, some of the BPO stuff we do is for good reasons. I mean, sometimes it's somebody's trying to get rid of their mortgage insurance on their property, and we're doing a valuation for that. Sometimes it's the homeowner and their lender are arguing about how much insurance they need on the property, and we do a value for that. So it's not always bad, but we can generally tell when we drive by the house to take pictures if it's bad. Because if there's nobody living there and the weeds are 3 feet tall, there's a whole lot of bad going on.
Have you done a BPO and the house is not there?
I actually have.
Yeah, I know the answer.
Yeah.
Somebody's shaking. I knew the answer before I asked it.
I've heard rumors of that.
Oh, this is a great story. So I get a call from one of my asset managers. Hey, can you do me a favor? Which that's the sign you are about to get screwed if you ever get into this side of the business, is because these people are not used to asking you for favors. They're used to telling you what to do, and you say, yes, ma'am, how high? So they call up and they say, hey, can you do me a favor? And I, of course, said yes. And they said, well, we have this property in San Simone that we need an agent to list. And I said, yeah, we can do that. And I'm looking on the tax record, and the tax record says there's about a 2,000 square foot manufactured home there. And Amanda, who works for me in Sierra Vista, went out there, and it was a pile of charcoal. So what I thought was probably going to be about $120,000 listing, on 40 acres and all that great stuff, we ended up selling that for $11,000.
Wow.
So then we just recently had another one on the south side of town, where we went there and whatever manufactured home was supposed to be there wasn't there anymore. We ended up selling that for $25,000 or something. Yeah, it's happened. We get an assignment, we go there, there's no house.
I love there's not a single person in the REO business who's never done that. I remember years ago, I was a team leader in San Antonio, and I was watching the news one night, and Kathy Goodwin was kind of our Sean Polson in San Antonio. Still this day, she did nothing but foreclosures, probably top 2 or 3 in San Antonio. And so I was watching the news one day, and all these guys are doing this big drug bust, and all these guys are on the curb with handcuffs on, and right behind them is a Keller Williams sign, Kathy Goodwin. So Sean, what advice would you give people on here that could use this information of REO short sales that can help them just thrive or just survive through everything we're going through? Is there any advice? Is there anything they could do, like they need to know about? Not necessarily get assignments, because that's too big of a process. You know, short sales, what advice would you give them on this subject for where we're at in the market?
Well, short sales, when I see the question about is there an opportunity to learn more about short sales, and yeah, I have a whole class we used to teach about it back in the day, because it's not a 15-minute conversation. It's Jones actually asked me to break it into an hour one time, and I was like, yeah, I don't even know if it's that short. Yeah. But one of the things about short sales, you need to figure out whether or not you want to do it and take it extremely seriously. Because if you've got a homeowner that you've got a relationship with, and they are really wanting to work something out with their bank to avoid getting ultimately foreclosed on, you as the real estate, as the listing agent in that, you have an incredible ability to screw that up. If you're not on top of getting things to their lender, the lender can close the file. Depending on where they're at in the foreclosure process, the lender might not reopen the file. To even at times, we have relationships with our congressional representatives where we'll file complaints with the congressional office, the CFPB, the Arizona Attorney General, when these banks aren't behaving, to get them to behave, because they don't always behave. And if, you know, a lot of us are DI type personalities, or at least some kind of D, and D goes a long, long way in this realm, but also so does the C. Because staying on top of these things and being able to create the systems and processes that go into them have a lot to do with the level of success you're going to see. Most real estate agents' success, back when short sales were all the rage, real estate agents' success rates with short sales was about 30% of the time.
So what are you saying, that they took the listing under contract? Give me that 30%. What is based on?
They took the listing and it closed.
Got it. So from
30% of the time.
And it closed, you're saying was about 30% back in the day. I can believe that.
Yeah, and back then, the other 70% of the time, Dave Kipling got the listing.
Yeah.
Because it got foreclosed on. We've typically maintained about a 95% success rate. And one of the big things, guys, I attribute that to is making sure the seller wants to do it and making sure they're prepared and they're going into it eyes wide open. If you got somebody who doesn't want to jump through the lender's hoops or seemingly hates their lender and wants to stick it to them, well, short sale is not the route you go with that. If you really want to stick it to your lender, just keep not paying them and stay there and make them evict you. That's how you stick it to them. You know, you don't go do short sale with them.
So if somebody has, do you think the market? What are your predictions on the market? You follow the market pretty good. Do you think? I mean, this is not your normal shift like in 2008. This isn't economically created. This is, you know. Do you think it's going to go to more short sales? Do you think we're going to have to worry about that, or do you think it's going to go back normal? I mean, you list a lot of the same things I do.
Well, this wasn't created by housing.
Yeah.
Where what the last one, the fundamentals of how mortgages even got done, were just so ass backwards sideways with everything that was going on back then, that housing actually created that. You know, the mortgage companies melting down and the banks melting down was all related to mortgage, right? This is different, although with all of this unemployment we've seen from this COVID thing, it's kind of causing that same anomaly where we have all of these people who are stopped paying mortgages. Because there's 6 million people that have opted to go into forbearance. There's a number of them that you don't even know. I mean, they don't even necessarily need it, and they're opting to do it because it seems like it's free money.
Opposed to abatement or something like that, putting it on the end. You're saying forbearance. Did y'all explain what forbearance is yet?
Well, we did, and then we also talked about the outcome of it is really unclear. I mean, Fannie Mae released some guidance that basically 30 days prior to the expiration of the forbearance, they're going to review you for any one of these different options, and it's really not going to be your choice. You know, if the lender, if you were supposed to be making $1,000 a month mortgage payment, you go into forbearance, the lender reviews your financial situation at the end of that forbearance, and they go, okay, now you need to pay us $1,500 a month to catch that up, because that's what we deem you can do. Your option to that is probably going to be, I'm walking away.
Yeah.
Right? Or I'm going to do a short sale or something else. They're probably not going to give you a bunch of different options. They're going to give you the option that makes sense based on the situation you're in. So.
Yeah. Short sale would tell me that the market goes down and prices go down. You can have a foreclosure market go up without the short sale market going up easily, couldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, the two things are not as connected as we might think they are. I mean, there's a certain amount of people who wanted to do that'll want to do a short sale, and they will end up in the foreclosure space because the bank, either the agent is incompetent with the short sale, or the market, you know, what buyers are willing to pay for it and what the short sale lender wants are two different things, and it can't come together. And the agent doesn't effectively know how to dispute that valuation with the lender. But in every foreclosure had an opportunity to be a short sale or otherwise sold. There's people who get foreclosed on that have equity, you know,
right.
All the time.
It's crazy, isn't it? Well, that's why we got to lead. That's also why we have to lead generate, and generally, like in general of our databases, because some people go into panic mode. They don't do anything. They stop checking their mail when really there's a solution.
Right. Well, and we were talking about earlier is like, you know, all of the FHA, VA, and 97% conventional loan refinancing and purchasing that's been going on in, you know, the last, I don't know, maybe 12 months, at least 6 months, all those people are underwater right now.
Yeah.
So if you have any kind of blip in, you know, even if prices pull back 5%, 10%, and these folks have any kind of a change in their life,
yeah,
you know, because that's, I explained it to them, it isn't always that the people make a decision, it's the decision gets made for them in a lot of cases that something's going to change.
And that's the case of right now in the market. Some people's lives were affected without their even doing something bad, like not paying their mortgage, right?
Right. So it doesn't take an enormous pullback in the market to have quite a few of these, to have this activity with this particular space go up. Yeah. You know.
So somebody's got a buyer, and you kind of talk about the seller side on the short sales side. Do you still do, by the way, short sales for people if they get a listing and it's a short sale? Do you still do that for contract for people or no?
Oh, you mean other agents?
Yeah, other agents. Yeah.
Like co-list it with the other agent. We do. So that kind of answers that mentor question as well. We do have a program where we will assist with those in the processing and all that. I like to have a very good conversation with the agent who's going to list it, because there still is a certain amount of expectations that need to be properly set with that seller. Otherwise, we are all wasting our time. So, but yeah, we do have that program. As far as dealing with a buyer in a short sale, you have a couple choices, which I remember before we had any of these short sale addendums and that kind of stuff. Number one, you want to go read the short sale addendum if you haven't read it. So and back in the day, you know, the first short sale I was involved with was in 2003. I bought the property as an investor before I was even an agent. And we just wrote subject to lender approval on things and went. And if the lender wasn't willing to do the deal didn't go. It was just a very vague contingency. Now we've got this whole addendum to it, and one of the things the addendum says is that the buyer, until the lender approves the short sale, that the buyer can eject from the transaction at any time. So let me put it to you guys. You got two choices with that. You can show a buyer a short sale property and you can tell them, oh yeah, we can put in an offer on this, but we can keep looking. Or you can explain to the buyer that this process is going to take from the time we submit the offer on this for the seller's lender to make a decision on this. Odds are it's going to be 60 to 90 days. Are you prepared to wait that long? Because the seller in this case is facing foreclosure. So they kind of need to know we're going to be there when they're ready. And if this isn't something we want to wait around for, you know, we probably just don't want to tie them up, is another way to do it. And here's the thing about, you know, because I had a buyer's agent I got rid of that would do the first version, and she'd do it on our listings, which was really fun. So she'd tell people, oh, well, you know, this, we can put in an offer on this, but we can keep looking. Well, here's the thing. They put an offer in on it because they think it's a deal, right? Because otherwise they wouldn't do it.
Right.
And then you're showing the same buyer you just put under contract houses every weekend looking for a better deal than the one they've got tied up, right, so they can eject from it, rather than working with other buyers and putting other buyers under contract, right?
Right.
So my advice is with buyers is be very transparent that this process can take 60 to 90 days, maybe even longer, but we should at least be prepared to give it 60 to 90 days, or we just shouldn't even mess with these people. You know, we have a seller who's trying to save their financial situation. You know, if we're going to wait around 2 weeks and go look at other houses, we shouldn't do that. We should just move on right now.
Yeah, it's not for every buyer, and that's you're just wasting their time, the seller's time. Nobody wins.
Right. Well, and the transactions are going to sell as is. I mean, nobody's putting a new roof on that house. You know, nobody's doing any of that kind of stuff. And it's not a question to go ask the short sale lender to put a new roof on the house. They're not going to do it, guys. They don't own the house, and the seller can reinstate the mortgage until it gets foreclosed on. So they put a new roof on the house of 12 grand. Seller comes into an inheritance, reinstates the mortgage. They're not going to go take the roof back.
Right.
So the short sale lenders don't do a damn thing to these houses before they close.
Yeah. Any inherent advice before we close out on REO? Buyers are interested in foreclosures. They're trying to get a smoking deal. So what are some of the inherent challenges or warnings, and just advice on those?
Well, we talked about earlier is knowing the trustee sale process forwards and backwards, because the idea that your guys buyers are going to end up on websites like auction.com or Realty Track or Foreclosure Radar and seeing those what they perceive to be deals, you need to be able to explain the process involved in that. And let me give you guys a tip, because I get those calls. And I used to do advertising on Realty Track back in the day, and I'd get somebody, hey, we're interested in this property we saw, it's going to the auction. I'd say, great, that's a foreclosure property. There's let me get a report from the title company about it so we can see what kind of liens are on it, that kind of stuff. And then we'll get together and talk about it. It's going to take the title company about a day to turn that around. My office at that time was up at Oracle and Ina. Hey, can you meet me Thursday at 4, Friday at 3, you know, an alternate close. And then I'd order a listing kit from the title company. And they'd provide me with the liens and the taxes and that kind of stuff that are paid up. And I'd sit down with the buyer and I'd say, okay, so here's what's going on with this. Here's when it's scheduled to go to foreclosure. So what we need to do is you need to go down there and bid on it.
Yeah.
Okay, and if you're the successful bidder, you're going to need to bring a $10,000 cashier's check as earnest money. And then you need to bring the rest of the money in cash the next day to close on it. And there's no title insurance or inspections or any of that kind of stuff. And if you don't close on it the next day, they keep your 10 grand and then they auction it off again the very next day. Is that what you guys would like to do, or would you be more interested in the properties I have in that neighborhood that can get financing?
Right.
So notice I didn't try to do that over the phone. Now, if I was dealing with somebody out of state who couldn't meet with me, and we have Zoom now. I was doing this back in the days when cell phones were still a relatively new invention, but we still did things with fax machines, you know. So, but I got them to an appointment. I said, yeah, great. You want to buy that property that's going to auction? Let me get you all the information on that. Let's meet and talk about it. And I would convert them into a buyer and get them to work with me. I took so many buyers away from agents that did not understand how to explain the foreclosure process or do that. They just said, oh, no, you can't buy that. Or, oh, no, that won't work. With no, and if they just had the full explanation, the buyer wouldn't have been going and seeking information.
Right.
And just by me demonstrating my knowledge of that, the buyer automatically was hooked. They're like, he knows more than the person we were dealing with, so let's deal with him. So.
Well, good. Well, I think we hit our goal. And Jay, thanks for running the first half for me. I was doing a Zoom call with some Las Vegas agents. The goal, Sean, by the way, thank you. That was the goal was hit from what I could tell, and that is helping people understand that it's. I agree with this. Everybody needs to know every part of real estate. Becoming an REO listing agent is not for everybody. It's very few, actually. It's not as. I mean, if you put that kind of energy into doing other things, you probably make a little more money because you're not having to carry the money, and it's a high volume, low margin business is what it is. So I do think people need to understand foreclosures. You've got to understand short sales. You've got to know how to talk about those different foreclosures. You have tax foreclosures, you have the trustees. Or did I throw my Texas terminology in there? Did I say them right here?
Well, the tax lien foreclosure is a whole different beast. That's a judicial foreclosure.
Yeah.
Rather than the mortgage, deed of trust, which we call them mortgages, rather than the deed of trust foreclosures that the trustee sales that happen down at the side of the county courthouse. The tax lien foreclosures I've bought the tax liens on this property.
There you go.
And to foreclose that, I've got to go file a lawsuit to foreclose it, and it's not a question of I'm competing against other bidders. I just win if they don't pay me.
It's 2 years, right? You have 2 years that somebody could come back and pay up on those taxes. Is that right?
Once it's 2 years delinquent, they auction off the lien, and the lien gets auctioned off. They do all the tax lien auctions. They do every February every year. They auction all the delinquent taxes off at the same time. And when you go bid on tax liens, you bid an interest rate you're willing to accept.
Got it.
So the default rate is 16%. So then the people that are bidding on the tax liens, they'll bid 15, 14, 13, 12. They're bidding the interest rate they're willing to accept on the tax lien. They win the bid. They pay the county the back taxes. And now they have that lien against the property, which is extremely secure. It's in front of the mortgage if there even is one, which a lot of cases there isn't because the mortgage holder would pay the taxes. Yeah. From there, from me buying the tax lien the first time, I have the right to purchase subsequent delinquent years annually at that same rate I was willing to accept.
Oh, got it.
If I don't purchase a subsequent year, then it goes to the auction and I potentially have somebody behind me in position that can take me out. Once the taxes are a total of 5 years delinquent, so 2 years delinquent, they auction the lien. Once it's 5 years delinquent, I can begin a judicial foreclosure up until 10 years. At 10 years, once my lien I purchased is over 10 years old and I have not gone down the judicial foreclosure route, it's kind of a statute of limitations, if you were, that it gets wiped out. So that's the way that works.
So the goal here today was to make everybody understand that you shouldn't go into that business unless you really know it. That was the goal of this class. Yeah. So, well, once again, I appreciate it. I think you hit on it. You covered up some of those areas, some of the answers with buyers, some of the answers with sellers. I do believe everybody needs to understand the short sales, because you are going to run into people occasionally. They're going to be upside down. They need to know their options, and just know what they are. So, Sean, I appreciate it. I appreciate your time. I know your time is valuable, and we went a little bit over time. So thanks for being on here, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much. See you guys.
Anytime.
Thanks, guys.